Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Vietnam Innovators. I'm your host, Hảo Trần, the CEO and co-founder of Vietcetera, of course. Thank you for tuning in every single Tuesday morning to hear another episode of our show. We're in the midst of season 3, and you might hear that there are quite a few trends emerging this season. I think in this post-COVID world and this transition that we're going through, there's a lot of emphasis on issues such as supply chain, logistics, and perhaps most importantly of all, energy, actually. And for those of you living here in Vietnam or even elsewhere, we're feeling the impacts of that, certainly with efficiency, but also inflation and other kind of energy concerns. And we want to kind of showcase what we could look forward to. I think we all know the immediate kind of impacts at the gas station and at the pump, for instance, for the consumers. But largely speaking, how is it impacting the economy, the industry, and of course, with a view on Vietnam specifically. I've got 2 experts on the show here today. They are partners of GIZ, working at GIZ or partners of. We have Mr. Klemens Leutgöb. He is the managing director of E7 Energy based in Austria. Klemens, thank you for tuning in this morning. We also have Markus Bissel. He is the head of energy efficiency at GIZ here in Vietnam. And you guys might be wondering what GIZ stands for. I'll let Mr. Markus kind of explain in German first and then translation in English. Markus?
So GIZ stands for Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit GmbH. And actually the translation of this name is German Development Cooperation Agency.
Very good. And you guys, of course, have operations here in Vietnam, and I'm sure doing some fairly large-scale projects that maybe the average person doesn't know about. But I'm sure the industry is well aware of, and we kind of want to dive into that today. But before we go into the specifics, Markus, I guess my first question for you guys, and Klemens as well, but I'll start with Markus here. Tell us about what GIZ Vietnam is, and then we'll start with you, and then Klemens, if you could share afterwards as well.
Yeah, I shared already the name of GIZ, and I would like to start a bit broader what GIZ worldwide is doing. So GIZ is a federal enterprise and supports the German government, in particular the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, in achieving its objectives in the field of international cooperation, like I mentioned at the beginning. So we are active in around 120 countries worldwide and have around 25,000 employees. Our approach is always to cooperate quite close with the people from the different countries. So that's why we always try to focus on national staff. In average, we have around 70% of national staff. And particularly, GIZ Vietnam provides advisory services to the government of Vietnam in 3 priority areas. So first, this is vocational training. We have a big project there in the south of Vietnam. The second area is environmentally policy and sustainable use of natural resources. And the area we would like to talk on today is the energy sector. So I'm part of the energy support program. At the moment, we have around 60 employees working in the energy sector and try to support the ministry or the Vietnamese government to improve the energy efficiency and also to increase the share of renewable energy in Vietnam.
Excellent. Thank you, Markus, for sharing that. And out of a team of 60 experts, I'm sure you guys need all the support you can get. Energy is much more than what people think. Klemens, maybe you can share about your role as the managing director of E7 and how you guys partner with GIZ to kind of facilitate these support programs.
Perhaps just as a personal introduction, I'm working in the, let's say, energy sector already for I would need to count 25 plus years. So I see myself as an energy economist, dealing a lot with energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. Precisely the topics that Markus mentioned as focus areas of the GIZ activities in this field in Vietnam. And in this role, we have been engaged as consultants to support the let's say, development, enhancement of the energy efficiency market here in Vietnam. because it's much about organizing efficient use of energy and also use of renewable energy sources by market-based instruments. And this is my role and the role of the team of our company in supporting Markus and his team in this field.
Excellent. Thank you, Klemens, and of course, Markus, for sharing that overview. Let's dive right in. Where does Vietnam sit on the world energy map? Markus, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so this is actually a quite interesting question. Where does Vietnam stand in comparison with other countries worldwide? So, energy transition is a quite hot topic, and we always use there an indicator to see how where Vietnam stands actually. And it's issued on an annual basis from the World Economic Forum. And there, the energy transition of Vietnam is, they are ranking on the 65th place from 115 economics. So in the, I would say, last third, the Vietnam is still ranking. So that means there's still a lot of things to do to improve in Vietnam. What is very impressive, or what was very impressive during the last 2-3 years, so the increasement of share of renewable energy, because there was a feed-in tariff. That means people who installed a solar rooftop, for example, they got some money from the government. And during the last 2 years, there was a rapid increasement up to 20 gigawatt within 2 years. And this is worldwide seen from all the countries, which was really impressive. What is also quite impressive is already the share of renewable in general, because it's not only solar, it's also hydropower. The share for the power capacity, it's around 28% for hydropower already, plus the solar power, which is in comparison to other countries quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been living in Vietnam for a long time, and I've seen the progress of everything from wind turbines to solar energy being adopted, not just by consumers, but industry, commercial. It's quite phenomenal, perhaps one of the fastest growing of the world. Which leads me to my next question, and I'll have this for Klemens here. How about on the world energy saving map? I know this question could relate to both consumers and businesses, but what are the energy kind of saving practices here compared to the world? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
I have to say perhaps I'm not the best person to answer here, because my knowledge on how far Vietnam really is a bit limited to the project I'm doing here. But it seems to me that generally energy efficiency, efficient use of energy, seems to be much more difficult than pushing forward the increase of renewable energy sources. And at the end, we need them both. Yeah, this is not something specifically for Vietnam. It's something that is a general statement all over the world, that just pushing forward renewable energy sources will not lead to a sustainable energy transition. We need a continuous, and this I really want to underline, a continuous improvement of energy efficiency through all sectors. And here we also need market models that work in this respect, that offer services to different customer segments. Because energy efficiency, I've worked in this sector for many years, is a bit a difficult topic. I don't know the English expression, how to say it in German. I would say you need, da muss man dicke Bretter bohren. Markus, can you help me in translating this? How would you say it?
Drill thick breads.
Yes. So It's really a very, very difficult topic, because you can't see energy efficiency. Yeah, if you install a PV, wonderful, you see it. If you install a wind turbine, oh, beautiful.
It's almost like in medicine, you have treatment and then you have prevention, right? I think a lot of people are focused on treatment because obviously people want innovation, which is excellent. That's definitely the driving force and what gets people excited. But at the same time, prevention, so I guess, in the energy world, what that would be energy saving, it's not as cool. It's not as it's hard to change practices.
Yeah, it's a good analogy, I have to say. I never thought of it. I will use it in the future.
There we go. Innovation on our show right here.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to kind of communicate to consumers that way too, but also businesses, especially those in Vietnam, on the topic of how is Vietnam sitting in the world saving map. Actually, Asian mentalities in Vietnam, specifically, if you look at the whole COVID history the last 2 years, it's been excellent at prevention. People are adopting, masks. And if you look at, COVID cases obviously rose once Omicron hit, but in the beginning, they were really good at prevention, whereas treatment was always seen as a solution elsewhere for many reasons, of course. But let's not go into that specifically.
Let's take this analogy. I think what is missing in order to push forward energy efficiency is the crisis. Yeah, because energy is there. Yeah, so the energy consumption is growing, and as long as the economy is able to satisfy the increasing demand, there is no crisis about that. So it's more about understanding that it's an important contribution to energy transition in the long run. And of course, we as human beings have some difficulties to think in long term. Yeah. And then, of course, as I said, it's a complicated topic because you need energy everywhere. If you just think of your household where you need energy, in Vietnam, it will be electric appliances, it will be cooling. In some regions, it's also heating. Then you have hot water. And so you have different fields where we all, everywhere see the need to get more efficient in order to be able at some point in time to cover our energy demand really by a large share. I mean now really 80, 90, perhaps even more % with renewable energy sources. This is energy transition at the end. And you see, this is really a huge challenge.
Markus, I want to follow up on that. Of course, you're the one here in Vietnam. You're sitting, on the team here at GIZ Vietnam. What are some effective methods that you've seen, that your team has seen, that the country is working on in this idea of energy efficiency and saving in practice?
Before I respond, I would like to follow up on the comments from Klemens that energy efficiency needs crisis. I totally agree, but you can see it now for example, in Germany. I recently was in Germany, in my hometown. Yeah, we are depending very much on the gas and oil import from Russia. And of course, everybody can provide a small contribution to show that he or she's against this war. Just use less energy, less gas, or use less the car and so on. But indeed, nobody do it really. So that's really a pity. This could be a small contribution from everybody, actually.
I have to say, just quickly, before we go back to Vietnam, as a consultancy, we see that the demand for moving away from gas here in Austria is increasing tremendously. We have so many people who are asking us, what can I do? And we try to help them. So a crisis is always something that pushes us forward. Unfortunately, as human beings, we seem to need this a bit. But as you said, prevention would be better, not to wait till you are ill, but to think before. And this is what we try with our work. with some success, I would say.
And Markus, what are those successes in Vietnam?
The Vietnamese government, they issued the Vietnam National Energy Efficiency Program. So there was the first one from 10 to 2015, and Vietnam National Energy Efficiency Program from 2016 to 2020. So there were a lot of measures described how the industry and also the households can save energy and what the government do for this. So, and there are definitely some achievements. For example, with the Vietnam Energy Efficiency Program 1, the country saved 3.4% energy, and for the VNEP 2, they saved 6.5% energy. So this is already a success, and there were different methods the government applied. So, for example, there is a very, let's say, comprehensive legal framework on energy efficiency, very much focusing on the industrial companies, because they consume around 50% of the national energy consumption in Vietnam. So they're trying to provide capacity building programs for those industrial companies. And they also promote technology transfer with international companies. And so these are just some examples the government of Vietnam applied in Vietnam and which were quite successful. However, they are not enough.
Let's talk about also for private businesses. How could they assist in that eventual transition, or gradual rather?
So it's all up to the decision maker from my experience. We called it public talk, where we had a discussion at the Hanoi University of Science and Technology, where we presented the current status of energy efficiency to the students there. And there was also a nice lady. Actually, she was 75 years old already, a Vietnamese lady. She's a CEO of a cosmetic company producing cosmetic here in Vietnam, and we supported her last year. And she was very much interested in energy efficiency, and she pushed this topic in her company forward with 75 years. And she was so enthusiastic on this topic of energy efficiency, and she really achieved a lot of energy savings in her company. But sometimes, on the other hand, you have CEOs of industrial companies which are not interested in energy efficiency, saving energy. They don't see the benefit. They are focusing on the production. They want to increase their production, but not really to produce more efficient, unfortunately. So from my perspective, the decision maker of the companies, you need to find out who's the decision maker first. These are the people you should focus on.
I think efficiency can be misunderstood sometimes as simply saving energy for the sake of saving energy. But I think it's also about increasing productivity, which is essentially making more money, but also being more efficient at the same time, which leads me to my next question. And I'll start with Markus, and I'll have Klemens comment here as well. What are some of the internationally proven ways of saving energy that could work in Vietnam, but haven't yet been utilized? So maybe Markus, you can name a couple of those potential kind of options, proven ways, and Klemens, if you can comment how that works in practice. Start with Markus here.
Yeah, I also used to work for more than 25 years in the energy sector, and I used to work for German utilities, and there we also advised our customers to save energy. And we started around, I would say, 10 years ago, and it was all pushed by the government at the end. So they forced the utilities to support their customer to save energy. This was the first big step, I would say. And the second step was actually there was some incentives. So if you conducted, for example, energy audits in Germany, specific energy audits based on international standards, then you got some tax incentives, and that's pushed the market, and that's raised the awareness. So coming back to the decision maker, of course, their interest, they know if we can reduce the taxes, then they will follow up and they are interested in this. So then energy efficiency was an important topic in the companies.
Klemens, perhaps you can comment on that as well. I mean, things like incentives, how does that work in practice?
I would like to follow up with Markus' remarks. I think we have to be realistic in that sense that energy use will never be a priority for a company. Hardly a priority. I mean, if you are an energy-intensive industry, like steel industry, cement industry, whatever, then of course, yeah. But for most businesses, energy use is just a tiny thing in the whole game. And usually, I mean, if you are a good manager, you focus on the important things. Yeah. And energy use is not the most important. So if you want to improve energy use, because if you look at it from a top-down perspective for the whole economy, you see that this is necessary, then you need to apply policy instruments. And Markus mentioned this policy instrument. Policy instruments help to produce interested parties in the game, which would not show up without this policy support, as I said before. And Markus mentioned two policy instruments. One is taxes, like emission taxes or energy taxes. The other he also mentioned is the obligation of parties, like in Europe, a very widely used instrument, obligation of energy utilities to support their customers in saving energies, in offering services that help their customers to save energy, against a certain target which they have to fulfill. Yeah, and of course, these kind of instruments would also help in the Vietnamese context. In this sense, Vietnam is not different to other countries, that you need to have someone who really has an interest in saving energy and brings in this interest in the whole game. And utilities may be a good interested player, and because they can also then work as energy service companies, and we have seen this development in Europe, that many utilities, of course, they are still supplying energy to their customers, but in addition to that, they also provide energy services in the sense that they help customers to use the energy more efficiently. And these services are very well accepted on many markets in different sectors.
Let's go back to what you, the two of you and your teams do within GIZ as well. I mean, aside from raising awareness, information, what we're doing on today's show through public forums and training, what else is GIZ Vietnam doing to support the country's energy efficiency goals here in Vietnam? Markus, I'll start with you.
Yeah, firstly, I would like to mention that we always in our project cooperate with political partner. So we are closely cooperating with Ministry of Industry and Trade of Vietnam here in Hanoi. So because they are responsible for the energy efficiency in Vietnam. So, and we always cooperate quite close and develop different measures because they have the knowledge of the energy sector, the best knowledge of the energy sector in Vietnam. So how we work usually, we are working on, we call it action area. Like you mentioned, it's capacity building. The second one is legal and regulatory framework. And the third one is technology cooperation. I would like to give you some examples for example, capacity building. So what we just recently published is a website for the key person in the energy efficiency sector. These are the energy manager and energy auditor. So the energy auditor are the people which conduct the audits. So they help them to find, they help the companies to find the energy efficiency potential. and the energy manager are appointed person from industrial companies. So we provide them with information about energy efficiency, but also we created a forum where they can exchange on different topics. And there we have already 800 member registered, and there's quite a lot of traffic in this forum now. Of course, still need improvement, but it's a good starting point, I would say, because you can learn from each other. So this is, from my experience, the most, one of the best approach to increase the capacities. And as I mentioned, legal and regulatory framework is the second action area. There we are supporting on MOIT on important legal documents. There is an energy efficiency law and a decree 21, which is actually the implementation of the energy efficiency law. With our international experience, we provide inputs to amend it or to amend it actually. And last but not least is technology cooperation. As I mentioned, we can learn from each other, and the technology is internationally available. So therefore we try to matchmake, let's say, international companies, technology provider with Vietnamese companies to apply those proven technologies.
I think all these initiatives, such as business matching, information sharing, technology transfer, all great initiatives. But let's talk about the one thing that we could do, which is to really clear up misconception. Of course, information is important, but let's talk about the top misconception, which is that clean energy, or just being energy efficient rather, is expensive. We touched upon it before, that at the end of the day, people care about productivity, increasing production, at the end of the day, making more money. What do you two want to tell Vietnamese business leaders today on today's show about this misconception? Is it expensive? And if it is, if people are willing to make that investment, what are the returns they can make later? So let's talk about that. Klemens, I'll start with you.
Yeah, a very difficult question, because what you are touching is what are the technical measures behind energy efficiency. So what do you need to do in order to save energy? And of course, there is a wide range. In some cases, it's just behavioral measures, which are not expensive at all. But of course, if you go into a company where energy consumption is caused by use of technologies, and then you very soon will find out that you need to replace certain technologies, and then of course it becomes expensive. At the end, energy efficiency is always a replacement of energy use by capital investment and know-how. When you are at this point that you need to invest capital, then I would say it's not about expensive or not, it's more about economically viable. So the economic dimension comes in here. Generally, I would say in most cases, energy efficiency is a good economic decision. It's not the case that you make once an energy saving measure and then that's it. You have to follow up continuously, because technology is developing, know-how is developing. So it's a continuous process of improvement. And of course, you always need expertise. Markus mentioned these energy audits. Simply efficient use of energy is a matter of expertise. You need to have experts about that, who know the technologies, who know how to apply the technologies correctly. And you need to bring in this expertise, and energy audits are one way to do this in a company. Therefore, I think it's a good starting point that in Vietnam companies have to do these energy audits, also compulsory. And experts will help you to select the most economic measures from those that are less economically viable. So no simple answer to this simple question.
Markus, I want to frame the question in a second way as well. Expensive, not expensive. But most of these business leaders that are open to it, they might be asking, how long is the return on that investment? Is it years? Is it decades? Is it immediate? Is it, I'm sure there's different phases of measuring that. But to follow up on that question, how do you answer that?
Yes, I have a very clear answer on this, actually, because we supported 8 companies recently for 1 year and helped them to find energy efficiency opportunities or solutions. And so we helped them also to implement. And at the end, we found out around 60 energy efficiency measures, thereof around 60 or 70% implemented within 1 year. And the return of investment was less than 1 year for those measures in average. And the companies itself, they implemented the measures because they had the trust to the companies where they were supported by, from the energy auditing company and with also the international support. So, and they trusted the companies, and then they implemented the measures. Of course, those were not investment intensive measures. They were more the low-hanging fruits. We call it low-hanging fruits. So where the energy saving potential is quite high with a small investment. But there we found out that the energy, the saving were quite high. And we also calculated one interesting number. It was the investment per saved kilowatt hour. So, and this was around $7 per saved kilowatt hour. And for this, you cannot buy electricity from the grid. So those investment in the savings were lower than the electricity costs when you buy it from the grid. These are experience from Vietnam. So where the low-hanging fruits are very obvious. You cannot apply this in Europe, but for a developing country or emerging country like Vietnam, these are some numbers which are proven.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. And my last question here today is in regards to the recent COP26 conference convention not too long ago. And here, Vietnam made a commitment as well. How important and what role does energy efficiency play in regards to that commitment for net zero carbon emissions, phasing out coal? How important is energy efficiency? I'll let Klemens comment and then Markus.
Of course, I can quickly say my personal opinion. I mean, when I started in the energy efficiency field, my former boss was one who always said the most important energy carrier on the world is energy efficiency. So it's more important than coal, more important than gas. And you can show this by figures. Yeah, when you do worldwide analysis, then you see already now the continuous flow of energy savings over time contribute to energy security much more than new resources which you find in coal or in gas or whatever. This is the energy security part, and the more it is important than also for reducing CO2 emissions or climate gases. I think without energy efficiency, this is a game which we surely will lose as a country like Vietnam, but also worldwide. Therefore, we shall not forget this opportunity, I would say, for us and for the whole economy, and focus on that together, of course, with the increased use of renewable energy sources.
Yeah, maybe I can add one comment on this. Actually, we as GIZ, we are very happy that about the commitment of the Prime Minister at the COP26, because there is now really big momentum, big movement in Vietnam. We can feel it everywhere. Everybody is thinking about how to achieve those goals and need and ask for support. When I say everybody, I mean the government. They are looking now for support, but still, unfortunately, everybody is talking about renewable energy. And like Clemens mentioned, energy efficiency should be a big part of this energy transition to net zero and coal phase out, to clarify this role of energy efficiency within the energy sector in Vietnam and be part of the energy transition.
Excellent. It's a constant work in progress. I think all companies, governments, organizations are moving toward that direction. We are living it at the moment, and I hope to see more advances. If I have you two on the show a year from now, we'll be commenting on how much progress we've made. Klemens, Markus, thank you for joining today's episode of Vietnam Innovators, talking about energy efficiency and innovation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Yes.
Through the support of the German government, the GIZ Energy Support Program aims to accelerate Vietnam's sustainable and efficient energy transition. Under ESP, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Project supports the Vietnam's Ministry of Industry and Trade and related energy stakeholders on 3 action areas. First, legal and regulatory framework. Second, capacity development. And third, technology cooperation. And together for a better energy future in Vietnam.